Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Eileen Tanghal, Managing Director at In-Q-Tel International. Eileen, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, certainly. So I started as an undergraduate at MIT. I studied electrical engineering and computer science. And when I graduated from MIT, instead of going for my master's, I joined a startup company, much to my parents' consternation. They really did not want me to do that. I had offers from large companies, and I remember my mother calling the co-founder going, "Do you have health insurance? Because my daughter needs to have health insurance." And he had to say, "Yes, we have health insurance," even though we're a small company. So that was a really good experience for me because we were just 7 people. We had less than $1 million in revenue. We were going through a business model change. And that company grew from less than $1 million to $100 million in revenue and went public in 2002. So I had experience being in a startup, which of course is very helpful when in the end your job is to work with startups. Besides that startup, I actually went to a .com or a .bomb back in 99, 2000, the heady days of the .com, which we were 300, became 800 and went down to nothing. So I like to say I had the good experience and the bad experience being in startups. So when the .com bubble burst, I, like many, decided to go to business school. I'd had a taste of being a product manager at the .com, and I wanted to go to business school to learn how to be a better product manager. So that's why I went to business school. So many people ask, "How'd you get into venture capital? Like, tell me how I get in." I said, I really don't know. It wasn't my plan. I studied at London Business School, and my first day of accounting class was actually September 11th. I don't know if you guys remember, there were no jobs for MBA students after September 11th, 2002, 2003. People were rescinding offers. But I was fortunate enough to have been recruited mostly because I think I had this unique entrepreneurial experience by Amadeus. They shortlisted me amongst some of the MBA students to interview with them. And I didn't know who Amadeus Capital Partners was, but their leading venture capital fund still are at the time. So I went to Amadeus, was apprenticed there, and did the typical senior associate. Then I went to another firm called Kennett. And in 2008, for personal reasons, we wanted to move back to the US. So moved back to the US, went on LinkedIn, tried to make some connections, and ran into Chris Moran at Applied Materials. And I had a semiconductor background, and he was recruiting. And that's how I went from going from financial VC and into corporate. It's just a series of not really planning for it, but ending up there. So I was at Applied for 6.5 years and went from being an individual contributor to having the opportunity to run the team and the funds. And it was a really great experience because we had a CEO change. And one of the big things about CVC, of course, is can you withstand a CEO change and a change in strategy? And at the time, Applied Ventures had been formed originally to do a lot of what I would call eyes and ears investing in clean tech and a lot of the areas that Applied was trying to go into. And with a CEO change, we had to shift a little bit more towards things that had immediate impact on business units, whether it be revenue or acquisitions. So that was a shift that happened. In 2014, Applied and Tokyo Electron were about to do a merger of equals. And I then decided to move on to ARM. When I was a financial venture capitalist in England in 2003, I had sat on the board with the now CEO of ARM, Simon Segars, and he wanted to build a group to try to find more revenue besides what ARM primarily was generating revenue from, which was IP license and royalty. So created this strategic group called New Business Ventures. So I went into that group, and the goal was to create a couple businesses, either through investment or acquisition, but mostly through acquisition, to diversify ARM's revenue. And I had been in for about a year and a half, and that's when SoftBank came calling. I kept joking that everywhere I was going, some Japanese conglomerate was trying to buy the company I was in. SoftBank acquired ARM, and I decided, after having run into the managing partner for In-Q-Tel, the West Coast, George Hoyam, he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "ARM is being bought by SoftBank. My role is changing. My husband and I are starting this coder school. I don't know what I'm doing. I might just take it like a year off." And he said, "Don't do that. Come and use your skill set to help your country effectively. And how can you say no to that?" And I've been at In-Q-Tel for the last 4.5 years. And most recently, I've been seconded to our London office to support now not just the US defense and intelligence community, but the Australian and UK governments. So we opened London in the offices, and I am here in a secondment for 2 years. But yes, I've had the experience of being a startup, financial VC, JIC VCs, and now government-related VC.
This is really cool. And it's not just startup experience. You had a very successful startup experience. And then you mentioned about the dot bomb experience of going up and down to zero. So how much of that successful and unsuccessful combination makes you a better investor?
Yeah, so I always like to joke that if you're always an A student and have never failed, then you're not really that smart, because you don't know what it's like to fail. And to some extent, you do have to realize it's luck. You can do a lot of the analysis, troves of analysis of S-curves trying to predict whether or not something will adopt. And in the end, companies succeed usually because the really good founder, the grit of the founder, and the founder's ability to pivot their product or their market when necessary in order to raise capital or get revenues. That's what I've found. And if you were, again, around in the 90s, you didn't know that Netflix was going to be what Netflix is today. You didn't know that Google was going to be the winner under Google, Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, et cetera. Yeah, so I think it's good for me to have been in one that did win, and then the other one that just didn't.
Very nice. And it's good to hear that you're accidental VC. You didn't plan for it. And I don't know if stumble into it is the right expression, but there's also one thing you mentioned, which is you need to survive a CEO change, and you went through that at Applied. Can you share why everyone says a CVC is only a CVC once you have survived the CEO change? Did you feel like it was really a danger, or was it a reinvention, or was it an evolution?
Yeah, at the time, because the new CEO had come from a place which had not actually seen significant impact from outside investments they had done, I was indeed worried that he would dismantle the venture capital group, because what is the point of it, right? I still remember the chairman at the time, Mike Splinter. We had a year where we had several exits and really good returns, and maybe 3 of our companies had been bought by Samsung. And so we were feeling very proud of ourselves, right?
Yep.
Look, we made these great investments. And he said something like, "That's just great, but what have you done for Applied lately? So good for you. You guys all got to play VC, and you can be proud of what you did, but you didn't actually advance what the corporate needed to do. You need to survive the CEO change because you need to show that you really made impact to the corporation." And that's usually the timing of that is there's at least 1 or 2 or 3 CEO changes in that timing to show the effectiveness of the venture capital fund. So we know that typical startup companies are successful within 5 to 8 years. What is the typical CEO tenure? That's maybe why some of the timings, you have to survive at least one, if not two CEO changes, and then show that you've been impactful.
And it's interesting because you go straight into the topic of showing value. And here it's interesting because most times it's hard to show strategic value, and financial returns take some time. Here you already had good financial returns, so you were not challenged on that. You were not challenged on wasting money or whatever. You were actually challenged on show us the value you brought to the company. What was your answer? And because you were challenged, what did you do differently afterwards?
Yeah, we started to get measured on very easy things like, were we creating revenues for Applied, or would this company create revenues for Applied? So we became clever about showing how this company could create revenue for Applied. And it could be revenue in 4 years or 5 years or 10 years. But before, what we would report on is, we've made these 20 investments and they have provided insight to these 5 GMs. So whenever you report on the venture capital fund, 20 investments, 5 GMs, and maybe some of these are doing joint development. We started to be more quantitative, meaning this investment of 3 or 4, or whatever it was, 1, 2, 3, 4 million is going to go into this company. We're going to enable this company to then do their product, which will end up being a rev share with Applied, which means X million dollars of revenue. It's all theoretical, but if you do it, you're going to have some weighted probability of it, which likely go to 0. But the whole point is that you are focused on bringing revenue to the company, right? So that's how we changed things. It went from being very qualitative to, I'm investing either for supply chain efficiencies, for rev share, or for acquisition, meaning we're going to invest here, get some rights, and we're going to buy this company, and this is going to bring, I don't know, a future 500 million revenue to the company. And so we started to report all of our investments against actual numbers of revenue to the company. And that was a big change because the CEO was driving revenue increase. And if you were to look at Applied stock, he was extremely successful in driving significant revenue increases to the company.
And so it's not just the messaging, the path to revenue and so on, because it would start to drive which startups you decide to invest in. Because before you may actually have invested in the ones that you believe you're going to learn a lot about a market you don't know or technology you don't know. But now you have this extra investment criteria, which maybe was explicit or implicit, that you need to show a path for benefits to Applied.
That's right. Whenever looking at investments from a corporate strategic point of view, I like to use the typical Horizon framework. So there's the Horizon 1, which is impact in 1 to 2 years. Horizon, this is me defining it. I'm sure other people define it differently. Horizon 2, impact in 2 to 7 years, and then Horizon 3, 7 to 10 years. And the CTO's office tends to be the 7 to 10 year. The call it business unit or M&A is 1 to 2 years. And I say that the venture fund is the Horizon 2. But when you're under threat, you're going to end up going either, no, the venture fund is part of the CTO's office, and we're just going to look at things that are very out there.
Yep.
And we go that way. Or as a strategic unit, you go, okay, they might cut us. So actually, we're going to have to get closer to the M&A group. And so as the leader, you need to decide, how am I going to allocate between these 3 horizons? Am I going to do 70% of investments in the Horizon 1, meaning i.e. growth companies or companies I'm going to acquire? Or is it 50% here, 50% there? And it's about understanding your leadership, understanding what is the role, what does the company need, right? That is, I think, the same in almost every CVC, right?
It's also going to influence the stage of the company you invest, because if you want to show a path to revenue, you won't invest in seed company, in the Series B, Series C kind of companies.
No, of course, you also play this game of what's going to give me cover. If I have one really good we made this investment. We bought the company. It's delivering, call it $50, $100 million revenues to the business unit. Because I can live on that reputational success, that's going to allow me to do 4 or 5, call them seed speculative eyes and ears things, right? So you have to be clever also, and you want to retain really good people. And some of the really good people don't want to do the boring growth. You have to say, okay, I, as the leader, or 2 people in the team are going to be the ones that make sure we fulfill what M&A wants, or the business you want. And we will give cover to the rest of you to do the out there things, the quantum cryptographic thing that will never affect the business in the next 1, 2, 3 years. That's the role you need to play as the leader.
Can you tell me, how do you enforce with your team, your investing team, to really go beyond the first level or second level network? How do you make sure that they are proactively thinking about diversity in who they reach out to?
Yes, at In-Q-Tel, we established a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. We have sort of groups within In-Q-Tel. Our hiring practices are as blind as possible. So, for example, if you apply to In-Q-Tel, we will strip out anything that will be able to tell us what your gender is, or we even strip out schools because sometimes people tend to have a bias towards the Ivy League. So first, there's the people you bring in to make sure that they are as diverse as possible, because with diverse employees comes diverse networks. The next is to take a look around at the group and make sure you really realize who's not being represented. The next thing is, if you don't have enough women on your team, then be proactive about recruiting them. And maybe you do have to sacrifice efficiency. And this is always the challenge when recruiting. I need someone in 2 months, but I can't find a female that I really think our team needs to be balanced with more females. So I'm just going to hire another male. I understand you need to get on, but if we just continue, you aren't going to get the balance. So we will take our time to try to make sure things are balanced. In terms of access and making sure all entrepreneurs, just like everybody, we do the best we can. We were just talking about this today in the committee meeting before I got on here. There are like 12 different organizations that are promoting and trying to help entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups like Black VC, All Raise, Upward, and Impact X. We as a team generally believe that in order to improve national security, you really do need to find the best ideas from wherever they come from. They're all mission driven, or some individual motivation to do that. But that's also because of the people we let in the door.
And I like the fact you are very explicit that this is about the trade-off. If you take your time.
And I also would say one other thing, which is beware of implicit bias, right? All these companies have implicit bias training, but I'm guilty of this myself before. Unless you had a double E degree and an MBA and worked at a startup, I wouldn't necessarily have thought you would have made it a good VC. And I definitely used to think that way, call it 10, 15 years ago. And it's not that surprising if you were actually look at Applied Ventures. When I was there, we all had engineering degree, MBA, technical experience, and that was the team. But the one thing about In-Q-Tel is that if you were to look at our investment team today, I think I'm one of 3 that has an engineering side. It doesn't mean you don't have to have an engineering degree. You don't have to have an MBA. You have to be intellectually curious. And it's all about this growth mindset. So there is this, yes, take longer, but it's also, look, don't narrow yourself to a specific box of they have to have an engineering degree, gone to HBS and a startup, and then they'll fit in the team. That is a mistake, in my opinion. And I'm not sure I would have necessarily thought that until I got to In-Q-Tel and I realized there's all sorts of people that can be venture capitalists. And this growth mindset of what you studied, what you've experienced doesn't define what you can be and how effective you can be as a venture capitalist.
So here I'm interested to talk about the resume, the CV you receive. So you mentioned you have this committee. You mentioned about stripping information away from the resume that you review. So what is it that in the resume, so not before meeting the person, but what is it that in the resume makes you think, okay, this is interesting for working at In-Q-Tel?
So what we do, and this is borrowed from many of the practices from Google and LinkedIn, is that each interviewer is looking at one dimension. So I might be looking at communication. Someone else might be looking at network. Sometimes we'll give people a case study. So how much time and effort do they put in the case study? So everybody interviews the person, but you're only ranking them on one element. When we come together and talk about those elements. And that's, again, look, we're not perfect, but it's a way to take bias out of the system because you're just looking at that one thing. One of my partners is a guy named Andy, and Andy was a presidential fellow and worked for LinkedIn, and he is very smart on these things. So he has brought a lot of his practice to In-Q-Tel.
Very nice. So we're getting to the top of the hour. So I want to finish with one question, which is about what are you most excited about for the next 5 years in terms of where you want to invest?
That's really broad. So I'll answer for In-Q-Tel in that, obviously, from a national security point of view, you need to ensure that climate change and supply chain are related to each other. Effectively, climate change tech and supply chain tech, which stops some of the geopolitical issue or hotspots that are happening in the world. Why are authoritarian governments putting Uyghurs in prison camps? Well, because they're sitting on natural gas reserves. What am I excited about? Effectively, anything that can stop really the exploitation of people because of what natural resources they have. That's why wars are fought, because, oh, that country has all the lithium in the world, and so now I want to take over that country. And when you do that, you upset their economy and the democracy, et cetera. So even though technology is potentially having been responsible for that, technology can also be the way to stop that from happening. So for me, it's what companies out there can stop these geopolitical flashpoints across the world from happening through innovation. And that's in many sectors. For me personally, and this maybe is obvious because of the pandemic, I really see a big wave of tech into healthcare. Finally, why isn't there more AI and ML at the edge in healthcare yet? I think we're just seeing the beginning instances of it. So the Aura Ring, all it's doing right now is checking some stats, but eventually they're going to be sophisticated in machine learning on it, plus your earbuds to tell you, we are sensing that something's wrong. You might want to call your doctor. And then if you want to really think closed loop type solutions. So I am personally thinking we are at the beginning of a big wave here. The auto industry, life sciences, government, and now I think we are just at the beginning stages of it making a big difference. Again, accelerated by COVID, but also accelerated by the fourth wave in computing, which has brought all the pricing of chips down and the ability for Edge ML to run on very low power microprocessors.
Thank you so much for your time. And this was a really good way to finish the interview. I can sense your passion for these topics. It was really nice. Thank you so much.
Of course.